Hello and welcome to TCG Buzz. Today, we're talking about the things that kill games. I'm joined by Kevin, and we are going to be talking about 10 of the most common things that kill your favorite TCGs. We're all TCG nerds here. We all have that one cherished game that we love and never want to see leave us, but they inevitably do. There are many games out there in the card game graveyard, and it is sad to see them go. But hopefully, you can use some of these items on this list. And if a game you love is kind of checking off some of these on the boxes, maybe you can, prepare yourself for what may come.
Absolutely. Worst case scenario, you're just going to be added to card game crypts, a little crypt to be added in. So if you are dead TCG, no shame. Someone will pick you up.
We are going to go through these individually. We have 10 of them on our list today, but a couple of disclaimers before we start. We are talking about established games. We're not talking about stuff that's like yet to come out or stuff that never really exists, vaporware. And we're not talking about like Kickstarters or tiny single person indie projects. We're talking about like games that are out on store shelves in local game stores, maybe even big box stores, the games that people think of when they think trading card games. And just because we have 10 items on this list doesn't mean there aren't a huge realm of other reasons that games die. These are just 10 of the most common and most prolific. Are we ready to get started with the first entry on our list?
Let's get into it.
Okay. So, you can't talk about dead card games without talking about bad sets. Many games that last for years upon years will have a bad set or two. I can think off the top of my head of several absolutely terrible Magic the Gathering sets, Pokemon sets, Yu-Gi-Oh sets. And obviously those games, they live past their bad sets. But there are plenty of games out there that just have one bad set and never recover. It might not directly kill a game, but games become a lot less relevant once they hit those bad sets. They're generally good jumping off points for people. A great example is Force of Will, Millennium of Ages, maybe the most famous bad TCG set of all time. And although technically Force of Will still exists, it's a dead game. It is at least a game on life support and has been, for over half a decade now. It is nowhere near the heights it was, and a large part of that was due to bad sets.
Yeah, lots of things can make a set bad. We have aesthetics, gameplay, and also if people know if a certain card is hollow. So I'm going to pull some of my MetaZoo experience here. One of the worst sets in MetaZoo towards the end of its lifetime, we're talking about classic MetaZoo here, was Seance. So in Seance, there was a big issue because the packs were actually trackable for their hollows. So basically, if you opened up a booster pack for Seance and you saw one of the card arts, there's 4 card arts in that Seance set, if one of the card arts was hollow, all the other packs with the same card art was also going to be hollow. So this really killed the secondary market investor value of that set. And the set, was really good gameplay wise and all that. But because people could track, if a certain pack was hollow or not, the overall booster pack value of the set went down.
Right. And what is a bad set can also be like very determined by what you're looking for in a game. A lot of the times it's just bad value on the secondary market. Even if you're not into a game to make money, like if you're opening a $80-$90 booster box and knowing you're going to guaranteed get $5 worth of cards, you're probably not going to have a great time. Or, maybe the gameplay is just bad. There are many reasons that a set is bad, and most games don't recover from that one bad set. If you guys want to see us do a full episode talking about infamously bad sets, I would love to do that. Let us know if that's something you'd be down for.
That would be a cool episode. One more point I'll say on this is the most important set, in my opinion, is going to be your first set. If you have a very bad first impression for a trading card game, that is going to stick with people. Even if you're a second and third and fourth set, you can recover, as Jacob has been saying. That first impression is what's going to matter the most, because when a card game comes out, the most footage and eyes in it are going to be on the release of that card game. So you need to make your first set very good. And some could argue set two is more important because cements set two cements how good the game is and if the game has any longevity. And you could recover any mistakes on set two. But in my opinion, that first impression needs to stick for any trading card game. People remember base set Pokemon. They remember alpha, beta cards from Magic the Gathering. People remember Blue Eyes White Dragon. Not everyone knows XYZ Summon. Not everyone knows Bloombro, right? Maybe Magic, maybe modern Magic players know what Bloombro is, but they're not going to, everyone knows the old stuff. That's what comes to
Right.
mind
There are
first.
so many games that don't make it past set one. And yeah, having a bad set at any time is bad, but it's certainly worse before your game's established with an established player base. Moving on to point number 2, the second reason that TCGs die, and it is a stale or bad metagame. This happens a lot more than I think people realize. Not only can a game just flat out die from this, it is often a leading, symptom of a game that gets canceled. I think it's also one of the big ways that whales check out of a game. The ones who are active, like competitive players buying a full case of every set to get the staples, to get all that. If they're not satisfied with a game because, I don't know, you've got a Blue Eyes White Dragon deck that's tier 0 and nothing else can beat it, your big diehard Red Eyes player is going to be pretty upset and eventually leave the game.
If you're a trading card game company, among the collector, investor, player triad, if you will, the players may not be the most important in the beginning because usually investors, collectors fuel it, but the players will stick. If the game is good and the metagame is good, even if no one's buying it for collector investor value, the players matter. They are the baseline for your card game. They'll buy your game if no one's buying it, if the game is good. And if that metagame is really bad, people are just not going to play that game, whether it's a big game or an indie game.
Yeah, I mean, I think the poster child for this particular entry is, I know we've picked on them before on this channel, and we're going to do it again in the future, but Argent Saga is the perfect example of this. A game with turn 0 combos that win the game, extremely, extremely powerful control decks that make games last hours upon hours, broken 2-card combos, that kind of stuff that just burned away any goodwill it had with actual competitive players, which was particularly bad for that game because its entire appeal was to people familiar with ARG and their tournament scene. So, like, being bad for competitive play was absolutely the worst thing that game could have done, and it 100% killed it.
You can recover from a bad metagame. It's not as hard as you would think to recover. The key thing is if your metagame is bad, there are busted cards or there's no diversity of decks, you have to do something as a company and not wait a year or so to do it because people only have a level of patience. Ban the cards, errata the cards, put in new cards to counter stuff. Trust me, I mean Jacob, Jacob and I are designers. We've been there. We made some overpowered cards at some point, and we either have to address it, by making new cards to counter it, or by banning or erratating the cards. That's what you have to do because you have to maintain the player interest in the game. If people don't want to play your game, they will stop playing your game, which means they stop buying your game, and you don't want that to happen.
It is worth saying, when you're running a competitive game, a game that people put their hearts into, there will always be people who get salty, get upset, because they lose for this reason or that, or their preferred deck or play style just isn't that good currently. And you gotta, filter out that noise. But when everyone's angry at how your competitive scene is, then you've got a problem you really, really need to address. All right. So that one's pretty self explanatory. And this one is as well. We've all been there and seen games that die out because they split their fan base. This can be done through, I think the big one actually is through rotations, where a game that did not have rotations, Lorcana is a great example of this. They, a couple of sets in, their power level has gotten a little too high, the card pool a little too high. So they have to introduce a set rotation into a game where it previously wasn't established that that was going to be a thing. And that can be a big deal breaker for a lot of players when you go, hey, half of your existing collection for this game is now unable to be played in the main format. And generally, the way they appease those people is say, well, you've got this separate format you can play with all the cards, right? And that sucks because now you got people focused on two different ways to play the game instead of everyone playing the same thing.
Yeah, people actually want to play with their cards. And you could build a cube with your cards for any game, but people actually want to use their cards officially. I'll talk about this in another bullet point, but Magic right now is a good example of this. Magic is not a dying game, they're doing great by all means. But if you're not keeping up with Magic, Standard is kind of dying as a format of Magic. Standard used to be the format for Magic for decades, and now it's all Commander. So people who wanted to play Standard and can't because all the local game stores are doing limited formats like pre-releases or drafting, or probably focusing on Commander slash EDH, those Standard players may not play the game anymore because they can't get cards for Standard and they can't even play Standard.
Right. And one of the things that I don't think people think about is another reason Standard in particular is dying is because it is often as popularly played on Magic Arena, which split that fan base. There are a lot of people who used to play Standard physically that said, nah, it's not worth it for me. I'll just go and play it online. And that's one of those things that people don't think about. When you add a digital client for your game, oftentimes you're not building a new additional fan base. You're cutting into your existing fan base and turning some of those people who are playing into online only players.
To play devil's advocate, though, online clients can also get new people into the game. A good example of that is Pokemon Pocket. So people who would not have, built decks or gotten into the Pokemon game beforehand do have access to playing a card game, even a simplified version of the Pokemon trading card game. And Pokemon Pocket, at a minimum, is a marketing tool because, hey, people have a simple game to play, collect cards easily. Oh, and maybe they'll go to a con and buy some cards from a vendor because now they have that in to the Pokemon TCG. But if you're focusing your competitive players to do drafts and competitive events online, like Magic Arena, you may lose those players going to a local Magic Night, a local FNM, or a bigger tournament.
I think that one of the things that's inherently an issue with this is there are only so many things that people can follow. People only have so much bandwidth for so many things. And I like Magic. I've always been a big Magic fan since I first got into it. I started playing around 2014 and I still love it, right? But I can't follow everything with it in every format. There are so many formats that I have to just turn my brain off to some of them because it's not possible to follow all of them. And it's not necessarily a bad thing to have all those formats and have options, but a lot of the times that that does kill a game is it's because that game was on shaky foundation to begin with, and splitting the fan base is a band-aid put on another problem, like with adding rotations. All right, on to our next one, and this one might be the one we end up talking the most about. Overmonetization. Are you ready to milk your players?
I am.
Let's get that whale money. Obviously, at various points in my career, I've preached lessening monetization in the TCG industry. Obviously, there is a time and a place for it. This is called TCG buzz, right? But oftentimes I'm sitting here preaching more of like an ECG model. And it's not because I don't like bling. I don't like shiny cardboard. I love that stuff. I mean, I really love that stuff. Like I'm a Pokemon TCG whale. I spend a lot of money on it. I mostly buy singles. I don't actually really buy packs because I'm smart like that. But there are a lot of games out there that take that too far, doing things like, stop me if you've heard this before, limited edition releases, specialty FOMO, secret layer cards, uh, sets that have hyper serialized what's it cards. My favorite example for like this style of over monetization is Oshi Push, a game with such a convoluted rarity structure, it is near impossible to understand. I don't think the creators of the game understand how many rarities and different setups they did.
I don't play Oshi Push, but too many rarities is too many rarities, man. And when you start losing track of the rarities in a game, that's an issue.
I'd like to compare that monetization and collectability and investability to salt. It is a key part of the recipe of a TCG, but if you use too much of it, the food becomes inedible. I remember back when I permanently checked out of Cardfight Vanguard. That was a big problem with the game during the late G era, where they were releasing sets with very low pull rates. They started doing cards that are like really really strong powerful cards that were limited to like one copy per case, stuff like that. I've never seen players burn the bridge and just sell out and say, nah, I'm not dealing with that anymore. There is a time and a place for rarity and for special collectibles, and it really can bring in the buzz and make players excited about your stuff. But there are games that take it too far and pay a price.
And even going more simple, the average cost of just booster packs have been going up for all the major card games in general. You know,
Yeah.
12 bucks for a Final Fantasy Magic pack, I believe. That's just how it is. It's just insane. And, someone will say, well, Kevin, isn't inflation a thing? Well, inflation is a thing, but we still see indie games selling their booster packs for like less than $3 per pack if you buy a booster box, depending on which indie game you're looking at. If other smaller games can make cheap packs, I'm sure the bigger companies can as well. They just want to milk your money.
We all want money, but there's a point where you're grabbing so much money out of people's pockets that it just becomes unfeasible and people start getting wise, you know. It is obviously a complex topic. Some people take it too far in one direction or the other. There are people out there who are just, let's be frank, have gambling addictions, right? And will put up with anything that a company throws at them because it's their brand, and they will let Daddy Corporation do whatever they want. And then there are people in the other direction where it's like, oh my God, you put holographic cards in your pack, you capitalist scum. There is a fine balance to it. You have to be somewhere in the middle. But, if there's a game out there that you're playing and you're really feeling fed up with how much it's ripping out your pocket money, uh, maybe it's time to step away, because in my experience those types of things, they never dial it back, right? It's always a level that increases in monetization. Like, look at Magic. For the longest time, it was you get a booster pack and you'll get a rare, and sometimes there are better rares, and maybe you'll get a foil card. And then it was, let's add mythics. They're never going to take mythics away. And then it was, let's add these special collector's packs, which have even more bling and stuff in them. And it was, let's do these bonus sheets and these mega foils and these extended arts. And they're not taking that stuff away. They're not going to go back to just how Magic was, in the 90s.
No, if they can make more money, they're going to make more money. I mean, Magic right now is carrying Hasbro if nobody knows what's going on. So Hasbro is going to milk their players for as much money as possible. But just to remind people in the podcast, and I think Jacob would agree with this, we want our rare cards to be good, right? People like broken cards. People like cracked cards, wink, wink, for their rare cards. That's fine. But you also got to make your bulk cards good to a certain point and actually put uses to your bulk cards if you open a booster box, like in draft, or using your bulk cards in a cube. If a card is more rare, you should make that card good, but you should also need less copies of that card to make the players happy in general.
Right. And getting those higher rarity cards shouldn't necessarily feel like an obligation to play, you know. But we can do 17 full podcast episodes on the finances of card games. In fact, we've got some episodes in the works that ancillarily talk about that. There's satellites to that uh that we're working on. We have so many thoughts on that. So we're gonna move on for now to number 5 on our list, which is maybe the one we have the least to talk about, but is an important fact of life to understand. And that's good old attrition. Naturally, over time, for whatever reason, even if you have made the perfect game, some people are going to find new things that they like more, or they just get sick and tired of playing the same game over time. Uh, Naturally, with any game, you need to be bringing in new players as old players leave. And a lot of the problem is when you get that big boom right when a game comes out, and those games don't build new players after that. So the natural attrition hits and less people are playing the game because let's say every month 500 less people are playing the new Bandai slop game that comes out, but they're only getting 200 new people playing because the game's been around for a while and it's less approachable. Well, over time, that will kill a game.
Right. Attrition is inevitable, right? It's gonna happen. How do you prevent attrition? Well, you need to continuously be growing your game, but I will put a caveat there. You don't have to push your game to be as most number of people possible. You have to maintain loyalty of the people who are already there, reward people who are already there. But you also have to encourage learn to play nights. So teaching the game overall, the community has to be able to teach the game to other people. Going back to a previous point, over monetization. If I open a booster box worth of cards, say 36 packs, 15 cards a pack, whatever, I should be able to build multiple decks from that booster box to give to my friends so they can go and grow the community. The easier your game is to play and get into at all levels, the easier it will be for people to teach the game and prevent attrition. But if you cannot make decks to your friends and give it out to teach people, if you need a whole booster box to play a game, attrition is more likely to happen. Basically, the easier a game is to get into, the less likely attrition will happen. People actually have to be able to teach the game, have the means to give their cards to teach the game, and want to do so.
Right. Like the anti example of attrition here is Magic, because Magic has pissed off a lot of people. And there are a lot of people who have quit the game, but it ultimately hasn't hurt them, at least in the short term, because they've been very good at getting new players. They've been very good at releasing products that appeal to new players and obviously doing universe beyond stuff, which I mean, that's the hack to getting new people to play your game, apparently, right? Lots of people coming in to play because they really love Final Fantasy. Lots of people who come in because they really like Marvel, right? Lots of people because they really like Star Trek. And that is a boost. So even when longtime players are complaining and are leaving the game and selling out of the game, there are new players. If Magic wasn't approachable to those new players, it would have already died. You know, a great example of a game that has for many years struggled with this new player dilemma is Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh! In its modern state is not a very approachable game for new players. Even with their more simplified like structure decks, it can be really daunting to get into as a game, which is why they've pushed splitting their fan base, right? They've offered things like Yu-Gi-Oh! Speed duels and duel links and other digital ways to play the game, and now their Genesis format. They are trying to find ways to make a very unapproachable game more approachable so that the attrition doesn't kill their game, which has been a thing for quite a long while.
Yeah, Yu-Gi-Oh is going to be really interesting because if they're not going to be adding in new players, we're going to see kind of this aging population of Yu-Gi-Oh players who will ebb and flow because, as they get older into their 40s, they'll probably have, more money or less money depending if they have kids, and we may see, the game uh decline more and more. It sounds like we're talking about a patient right now, an elderly patient declining, but Yu-Gi-Oh could get to that state, with the way it's
Right,
going.
and, the way generally that games try to combat that is with a classic Bushiroad style, "Let's reboot the whole game," which tends to not work very well. You'll get some new players, but you generally will lose a lot of the old players. It's a very risky maneuver. So Yu-Gi-Oh! Is such a fascinating example because there are genuinely people who are new to the game that pushed through all of the challenges with getting into it. It does happen, uh, but you can't ignore that it is a very difficult to learn game for a, like, first-time TCG player.
Yes, Yu-Gi-Oh is on a scale from 1 to 5, 5 being the most complicated. Yu-Gi-Oh is a 5 out of 5 game at its current modern day level. I will say one more thing on a Yu-Gi-Oh point though. One thing that I do think will hurt them in the long term is the Yu-Gi-Oh anime no longer existing. The Yu-Gi-Oh anime, for how cringy it was at times, I love the Yu-Gi-Oh anime, by the way. Like, just to clarify, 5Ds, I love 5Ds. Honestly, the Yu-Gi-Oh anime brought in a lot of kids. It brought in these younger
"Hey,
folk.
everyone, this guy likes the Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds anime." Nobody cares. Yeah, I was like, "Wow, thank you for that hot take there, Kevin. Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds is good? Oh."
Yeah, I liked it. Okay, I'm really by. I like the motorcycle. I love synchro summoning. Okay, the animation's cool. I mean,
Card games
fighting,
on motorcycles. Have we hit our 2011 quota yet?
right? But the anime really was good at drawing in that new blood. The anime was also very good at teaching the game because yes, Yu-Gi-Oh is a complicated game, and even if Yugi does break some of the rules here in time with like Swords of Revealing Light or some other anime, Deus Ex Machina, right?
I'm gonna remove your castle's flotation device. Ha ha.
That makes no sense, right? For the game,
I attack the moon.
you can, I guess. Even if that is, a little cringe and wrong for the gameplay, teaching the basic concepts of hey, equal attack points will trade. Hey, trap cards are a thing. Instant spells are a thing. That made the game a lot easier for kids to get into. And kids also knew what to chase.
I remember a specific episode of original Yu-Gi-Oh! Where they actually went and, like, explained how, like, chaining cards work. And
That's
I'm
cool.
like, "Whoa, that's something you can teach in a kid's, anime?" Like, that's a pretty advanced thing that they could just, like, totally ignore for the sake of, like, pacing of the show, but they're like, "No, let's explain how that works," right?
That is really cool. Yeah. And honestly, I would love to see more trading card games do storytelling marketing in that way. It doesn't have to be an anime. There's a game, an indie game I've been getting into called Origins, and something cool Origins does is they do a manga. They have their own manga of the game. They show off how to play the actual game with all the rules 100% in the manga. And when you actually buy the starter decks for the game, it's half a rule book, half a manga. If you, I wish I had it in my hands, but if you, it reads like a manga, right to left and left to right on the back of the book, it's actually the rule book of how to play the game. So it's a cool way of doing it, honestly.
Next on our list is, and maybe this is a topic for you to talk about a lot, is an over reliance on investors or, kind of related, kind of not, are just straight up rug pulls from the company.
Yeah, yeah. So people, people will associate classic MetaZoo with that kind of rug pull and over reliance on investors. I mean, alpha investments, it's kind of a love and hate relationship. Investor hype can pull a game through, early on. And I will say, card games love investors early on because who's going to put the most money in a card game for a Kickstarter? In the beginning, it's going to be the investors, right? Buying out boxes,
For sure.
boxes, the highest tiers. We like investors for kickstarting a card game, no pun intended, to get it to survive. But investors are also very quick to leave a card game.
Yeah, and often their needs are incredibly different, often opposite of the actual fan base and player base you're trying to build. Your players want cheap, accessible staple cards, right? Your investor does not. Your investor gets very, very annoyed with your game when you say, hey, that limited run we did of our base set was great, but we've got new people who really want to play this game because it's a growing brand. So we're going to reprint that set. And the investor says, Wee!
Yeah,
Balancing those two sides is incredibly difficult. But at the same time, who else is going to give you that amount of money when you're a new, fresh brand but the investor, but the whale?
exactly. And when a game is not even around, why would a competitive player play your game? There's no player base. There's no community to actually have showcased your game is good. The reality is kickstarting any card game or just crowdfunding any card game is a risky venture because trading card games are a risky venture. They require risk, and investors are the ones with the capital and the balls to take on that risk. So we like investors for pulling off, getting card games to go through. But if you are too anti consumer for your game, the consumers are going to go away. And it goes back to the idea that idea I said earlier, where if the investors are gone and the collectors are gone, the players are the ones to usually stick around. So you got to keep your game good for the remaining players if they're still going to play your game.
Mhm. And, a lot of this does also tie into our previous points talking about over monetization. But there are some specific nuances with the investors because not only can the the creators of the game pitch their game primarily towards investors, which can work very well, but oftentimes, they get trapped in that cycle where their game becomes like an investment commodity, like what happened to MetaZoo, even to games that are actively like really played and enjoyed today, like Flesh and Blood. Uh, it can be risky to those games long term, and it can make those games less approachable to regular people, to players. Because I know a lot of people who, when it's like, hey, you should get into Flesh and Blood. That's so up your alley. Or you should get into Sorcery. That's the perfect style of game for you. It's like, oh, isn't that one of those games that's like a pump and dump that all the crypto bros are into? It can be an issue. Now, the rug pull part of this is kind of the opposite. It's where the actual creators of the game are using it for cha-ching in a way that is not healthy for their game. And there are plenty of examples. We're not getting get into too much detail here, but there are so many examples of creators and owners of games shadily using them to make money at the expense of their own games. Doing things like selling additional copies of things that they promised were limited, in the back out of a warehouse, right? Doing randomized drops that aren't random, or straight up rigging tournaments. That's a surprisingly common one, you guys. I know of quite a few games that have done that, that I'm not going to name right now, for various reasons. Uh, those types of things will kill a game. And the sad thing is, generally, when a creator of a game is at that point, they don't actually care.
Right, because the reality is they're treating it as a business. And when it's a business, they want money. But there's a conflict there, right? Because the fans are not treating it as a business, they're treating it as a passion. Unless you are a pure investor and you don't care about, any fun of the community. There's a conflict of like the creator and the fans. So the creator doesn't care, right? And the fans are going to be burned by these anti-consumer practices in the long run.
Yeah, and including, like, especially if it's the creator doing something dishonest, like, that affects the investor types as well. There are plenty of people who got rug pulled real bad on a lot of games during the big indie TCG boom. Plenty of people got scammed because they're looking to invest in the next MetaZoo, as an example. All right, moving on to our next item. This is number 7, which is short-term planning. There are a lot of ways you can think about this, but I think one of the primary examples is with like licensed IP games, with rosters of characters that aren't extensive enough to last for a long time. What I mean is, like, there are games out there, some of the Bandai games, some of the games that Bushiroad has done that are licensed as examples, where like, yes, this is a really cool thing and it's going to do very well, but there are only so many times you can re-release a new Goku card. You know, I have talked to several people who left the One Piece TCG because they were hardcore One Piece fans, and they got cards of all the characters they actually cared about, and then they're like, "Yeah, there's nothing new and exciting for me anymore." That's just one example of how short-term planning can really ruin a game. But I think my favorite, and this is probably more towards the indie scene, but I have seen it with big games, are games that are really focused on like their first couple really big sets, and then it's clear they like didn't think ahead and had to scramble to release something. You know what I'm talking about? Where it's like, hey, we got our big first set. It did $1 billion, and then there's like a 9-month gap because they never worked on set 2.
Yes. I know what you're talking about. With trading card games, they're not easy to make long term. Set one's easy, right? But imagine you working R&D in a set, and then like, okay, I have to balance my set 2 cards with the set 1 cards. Okay, what about set 3? I gotta balance that with set 2 and set 1. It's cumulative effect. People forget a lot of busted cards in Magic the Gathering when it came out. Ancestral Recall. So making card games long term is not easy, which is part of why I think Jacob does push the CCG, put it in a box kind of model, because it is a standalone product in its own right. That's not really expanding long term. If you are a trading card game company, in my opinion, you should have at least 2 years planned for your sets. Know what you're going to do for about 2 years. And ideally have more than one release in a year, ideally 3 to 4, because if you only do one release in a year, very often people will just dip. It's too long, man. People want to play with new things. People want new things to look forward to. You got to give.
Yeah, we don't as a society have the attention span for that anymore.
Nope.
Another way that I see short-term planning really hurting games, and I'm sorry to keep bringing up Bandai as my example, but I think they're the poster child of this, but I think it's also just an upswinging trend I've seen a lot of with games is because, like, the first set is so important to nail, there's a big incentive for games to set their, like, starting power level way too high so that by set 3, set 4, the power creep has gotten so hardcore that the game feels like modern Yu-Gi-Oh! In a bad way, right? Bandai does this a lot, uh, but I've seen it fairly frequently with any games released in the past couple of years, where I play set 1 and I go, "Yeah, this feels like a game that's already a year or 2 old and established in, like, its power level."
Yeah, power creep short term is not good. you know, and power creep sells because people want cards, but it will not sell long term in general unless you are a super established game like Magic, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, who can abuse their players. If you're trying to power creep a hardcore an indie card game, it's not going to work. People don't want that in indie card games. People actually want to play with their cards and not play with, 80% of the cards being bad.
Mhm. Next on our list, and I think of all of these 10 examples, this might be the biggest pain point for people right now. I think it's the one I see people in like TCG spaces complaining about the most right now is unavailability. The elephant in the room for this category is scalping, right? If you're a game that, the MSRP for that new set is supposed to be $80, but because it's so in high demand or because the print runs so low or et cetera, people are scalping them and selling them for $250. That's going to burn through your hardcore fans and your players very quickly. And, obviously, like when you think scalping, Pokemon is the game people think about, and it is an epidemic over there. But I've seen this affect every game.
Yeah, scalping is a big deal, and particularly with Pokemon. But also beyond scalping, we got to just think about, is your game actually, can you actually buy the game? If the game's always out of stock, if your game store can't get any product in for the game, especially when the game stores are trying to do events for that game, but they can't get any booster boxes in because of scalping or investor hype or just not enough product, not enough allocation of product to those local game stores, that may kill the card game.
One of the biggest things that local game store owners I've talked to complain about is, oh, big new sets coming out for big game and their players have a ton of interest in it, blah, 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 blah. Right. And it's like, we have the money. We're going to go to our distributor and say, yes, sir, this set's going to be big. We're going to put our money down, slap it on the table. We want 10 cases of this set. 10 cases. Okay. And the distributor goes, yep, good to go. Everything checks out. Yep. Go ahead and take those pre-orders. Tell your players, yes, we're gonna have it available, right? And then cut to a week before release, and they get that dreaded email from the distributor going, actually, your allocation for this set isn't going to be the 10 cases you expected and promised your players. It's going to be 2 booster boxes and a used napkin.
Exactly. A lot of times these stores get overpromised and under-delivered, and it can cause, again, your local game store not to want to carry a game, even the bigger games, if they can't get any product, even if those products do sell.
Right. And I know game stores that just won't touch certain games because of it. Like, I know a lot of game stores that are just so fed up with trying to order one piece product that they don't even bother. And the other issue with it is the counter strategy for a game store in that scenario is if they want to get their 10 cases, that's what their players actually need. 10 cases worth for to support the local community. The way you actually have to get that is by ordering 100 cases. And then your allocation gets slashed down to that 10, right? And then congrats, you got it. But what happens in to the one set out of 100 where it's vastly overprinted by the manufacturers and the company at hand? So they go, "Hey, congrats! You wanted 100 cases of that Spider-Man set? Well, you're getting them." And they're all sitting on store shelves, and the stores lose money and go out of business.
Exactly. Overprinting is its own problem because, like you said, stores can buy too much product and not sell. So that can suck. But also, overprinting is also bad for previous points like monetization. Because if you have too much product of a set, it could lower some of the collector investor interest in the game. It's a very fine line to follow. At a minimum, you have to print to meet the current demand of the game and a little more for those extra new players. But
And that very rarely happens these days.
correct.
And unavailability also applies to like limited release, like FOMO items. There are so many people I've seen who are genuinely really excited for like a brand new Magic the Gathering secret layer. As an example, my own sister was incredibly excited when Magic the Gathering announced they were doing a secret layer set, several crossovers with Sonic the Hedgehog. Huge Sonic fan. And she had never bought a Magic Secret Layer before. But she was so excited because she loves Sonic and she really wanted them. And it was her first time like figuring out how to buy something, at release from the Secret Layer website. And she gets on, has to sit in a stupid queue. There are constant refreshes, freezes, and glitches. And, she's able to buy like one of the 5 available sets because scalpers and bots bought out everything, right? That sucks, and I hear about that exact thing over and 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 over again. It is maybe the number one complaint in our entire industry is, "Oh, I'm casually into this game and they're doing this thing that got me excited and made me feel excited for the game and I wanted to participate and I couldn't because it was ruined by scalpers or bots or, oh, we actually only printed 100 of these guys." And it's so frustrating because that turns what could be lifelong diehard fans into people who don't care about your brand because they remember that time they were personally burned by it.
Exactly. It's really sad to be honest with you because TCGs are games, right? That's a game to be had, to have fun with, and you're gonna lose fans with those anti-consumer practices. And again, the reason why Magic, Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon can get away with these practices is because they're really big. They have the money, they have the marketing, and they have the player base, the low player base, the collectors, the investors who will keep allowing these anti-consumer practices until the Magic community in particular steps up and does something like not buying the Magic products. It's going to keep happening, but I don't think we're going to see that. Honestly, I think players are too tribalistic, quote unquote, too loyal to their card game. They're not going to stop buying the product. They're going to keep buying it even if they hate what's going on. It's like a toxic relationship.
Like we talked about, there's a huge influx of new players who are getting into Magic right now or Pokemon right now that just, not necessarily intentionally or maybe subconsciously just understand this to be the norm. It's not. This is wrong. This is bad. I remember not too long ago when I could go walk into a store and buy any set of Pokemon I wanted for MSRP. It's such a shame and it's so frustrating. I think the comments here will be filled with people venting their own frustrations with this issue more than any of the others in this list. But let's move on to number 9 on our list, which is curating a toxic player base. So this is, all things considered, a lot more minor than our last point, I think. This used to almost feel like a major issue back in the good old days when our industry was healthy. But there are some card games that cultivate an audience that is unwelcoming, and it might be intentional, it might be unintentional, it just happens. And I don't have too much to say on this, but like a toxic fan base will prevent new people from getting into things. Like how many people don't want to play League of Legends because there's so many toxic League of Legends fans out there,
Been there.
and TCGs have that too. I've in the past I've picked on specific communities for being toxic, and uh, I kind of stand by what I said, but I know complaining about a particular community not being welcoming or being toxic isn't actually going to change things, you know? So that's not really the way I go about things anymore. I'm more into making the games that I care about more welcoming.
Exactly. It's all going to depend on context. A local community and how they treat their fans will be very different than a major tournament. And also, on that note, more competitive games have a higher chance to create more toxic environments. The more you have at stake for a card game, the more people have to lose. For instance,
Right.
if you're going to a world championship, I spent $500 on my flight, spent $200 on my hotel, Uber fees, right, to get to that event. How much was the deck? $500 Yu-Gi-Oh Plus or standard Magic if you're still playing that these days. There's a lot at stake monetarily and also reputation wise and even personal feelings. For some of these competitive players, that game is the thing. They don't have a partner to go home to. They don't have many friends, maybe. Maybe that's the thing they put all their time in. There's more at stake in their own personal, for their own personal feelings, their own personal life than other people, like, a parent coming to a tournament with their kid, you know? So we need to be very mindful of these toxic player bases in the competitive communities. But I will say, it's not always like that, right? Like I in my MetaZoo days, I would say the MetaZoo community, the classic MetaZoo community, was actually very welcoming in terms of the players. And of course, there's some drama here and there. Don't get me wrong, it does exist. But I would say that that community, for how competitive it was, with all the cash prizes that was going on, it was pretty nice. My MetaZoo friends can probably tell, say in the comments the same thing. But just because a game is hyper competitive doesn't mean it will be toxic. And the reverse is true. Just because the community is local doesn't mean that local community will not be toxic. It all depends on the games and who is really showing up the most to those games.
Also, the player base can literally be toxic. Jesus Christ, guys, take a shower before you go to the game store or the tournament.
Yes.
Please, for the love of God. I know it's cliche. I know it's cliche. I know there have been memes about this for a decade, but it's so true. Please, please, even if you don't think you stink, you do. Take a damn shower. I don't care if you got a Douse and Axe body spray. Do something, my guy.
Do you think if game stores sold like those little $1 Old Spice deodorants, they would sell? Probably not.
I kn I know a lot of stores that just have that stuff available, like, in their bathrooms, complimentary, because I I know a lot of game store owners that, when I've talked to them privately about what are the things that suck about being a game store owner, one of the things that's always on the list is, "Oh my god, there's this one guy who comes to our store, and he smells like dick and balls and sweaty ass, and everyone knows it, and we've hinted at it to this guy, but he's oblivious and he won't understand, and he happens to be a good customer, so like I'm not trying to do things, but I'm going to vomit every time I talk to this guy, right? We've all been to a local game store with a stinky fella,
Yep.
right? I know we are on a tangent here, but I can't not say, hey guys, if you think you stink a little bit, it actually means you stink a lot, and you are the store's stinky person. I get it. Like some people have different bodies. Some people sweat more. Some people, only can find time to go to the local game store after work and they worked a double shift at a restaurant, right? That happens, but do your best, man.
Do your best. Yeah, I mean, you have to just have self-awareness. I remember one time I wanted to go to my Magic Play group, and I realized, man, I haven't showered in like, a day, or whatever. And I told them, hey, I'm going to be late like 45 minutes so I can take a shower, and put on some deodorant. And, they appreciated that, you know, just being self-aware, just take a shower and the like. And you got to remind people sometimes, okay, what do you think about this? Having a smell check for a customer before a tournament, before they can play. I think that's funny, but maybe
Might be a little much. You're like, I'm just coming, come over there, lift your arm. You're good.
Got that Old Spice on. Got that axe.
All right. Anyways, number 10 on our list to totally whiplash our tone here is, listen, guys. Sometimes you've done everything right. Sometimes your game is perfect. Sometimes you've treated your players with dignity. You've not over-monetized. You've made a game that respects your players, respects the investors, respects the collectors, is fun, has an engaging meta game, has amazing sets, and it's still not enough because because someone ate a bat in a Chinese wet market. Seriously, outside economic factors, I think overall in the entire history of the TCG have killed more games than anything else. As like a TCG historian, someone who literally for years covered dead trading card games in a documentary style, uh there are so many games like that died because of bad world events, right? I cannot count the number of promising games that died because of the 2008 recession. There are so many that barely got off the ground, so many that were established that just people didn't have money for card games anymore. So many games died because of COVID and it killing competitive scenes and making it so people couldn't go to their local game stores anymore, right? And, not to be too sore for people, but right now is one of those extinction level events due to tariffs and trade wars and uncertainty. There are a lot of games out there that have to scale back or raise prices or blah, blah, blah. A lot of the other things on our list are side effects of world events.
Absolutely. I will say, caveat, you got to look at, you have to be opportunistic here because COVID hurt the established card games. A biggest example I would say is Pioneer just came out, COVID happened. Oh, was Pioneer? It's gone. Gone from Magic, right? If you were an established card game, you got hit. But COVID also sparked a ton of indie card games, MetaZoo, Polywog, all these indie card games popped up from COVID because people are like, oh, I got time to do my dream game now. And most of those games are long gone. They are dead now, unfortunately. But those the people behind those games took COVID as an opportunity to actually make a game. Even with the tariffs now, if tariffs are hurting, getting games from over the seas, you got to change. The industry has to change, like doing print and play, or also like Speed Robot Games making the games in the company, making the games in America, printing in the states instead. Like there are solutions and opportunities for any of these tariffs, pandemic, recession, whatever. You have to just be opportunistic and use your head and be creative to find solutions.
Mm-hmm. It is sad because I think you'll agree our lives are better when there are more card games out there that exist and are thriving. It is sad to see games that we love go. Uh, I think of games that truly mean a lot to me that are no longer actively around and no longer getting printed. You know, many of my best friends I met through playing Future Card Buddy Fight. It was an important part of my like early adult life. I grew and learned with that game. I built this channel off of that game, originally. And it's a very, very special one to me that isn't around anymore. And it's so sad when a game dies like that. It's one that you truly, truly cherish. But I wanna leave this off by saying death of a card game isn't necessarily the end. You can still, you know, take the torch up yourself, whether it be releasing your own version of that game with blackjacks and hookers. But you can also just keep running events for a game because it's dead, right? Like, no one out there is complaining if a board game stops getting printed because they have that board game. With TCGs, there are so many people out there who have a mindset of if new stuff isn't coming out for this game, I'm out. And it would be real nice to see more people go and look back at games of the past and give them a shot. Because yes, they might be dead, but that doesn't mean they're not fun experiences. I mean, I did an entire episode recommending a ton of amazing, like, forgotten games out there that people should play, and I stand by that. I don't care what games you go play, just go play more games.
Exactly. I'm gonna quote Game of Thrones here. What is dead may never die. As long as people know how to play the game, the rulebook is online, there is physical product available, cheap product, whatever, just physical product available. And as long as people still know how to play the game and want to teach the game, a game is not truly, truly dead. It's on zombie mode. It's not being printed anymore, but a game is not truly, truly dead yet. As long as the community wants to keep it alive, the knowledge is there, and the product is around. And check out that last podcast episode, by the way, with Jacob and the crew, because it's pretty good.
Yeah, and with that, we are out, you guys. We will see you next time with, I don't know, something cool. I'm sure I'll think of something. I'm not out of ideas. I have ideas. I know what I'm doing.